My name is Danielle Thompson, and I'm 34 years old. And this is the story of how my father walked my ex-boyfriend down the aisle at his wedding to my younger sister, because his mother supposedly couldn't make it. My father couldn't make his mortgage payment either after I stopped paying it. He lost the house. And no, that still doesn't feel like the craziest part. Because the craziest part is how long they all expected me to keep loving them after they turned me into the punchline. If this sounds unbelievable, I understand. Some days it still feels like something I watched happen to another woman and not my own life. But it happened. Over the course of about 2 years, my family took everything I thought was solid: love, loyalty, blood, home, and slowly hollowed it out from the inside. The explosion came 6 months ago. The rot started much earlier. I work as a senior data analyst for a major tech company in Seattle. The money is good. About 180 base, plus annual stock that vests on schedule if the market behaves and the world doesn't spontaneously combust. I own my condo outright. I drive a Model 3. I have a retirement account my financial advisor calls aggressively healthy, which is her polite way of saying I plan for disasters because somewhere along the line I learned that if I don't protect myself, no one else will. I built that life myself. No shortcuts, no trust fund, no magical safety net. I grew up lower middle class outside Tacoma, went to the University of Washington on a partial scholarship, worked 2 jobs through college, graduated with honors, and spent most of my 20s living like caffeine and panic were acceptable food groups. Everything I have, I earned. My younger sister, Sabrina, is 29. She is the opposite of me in all the ways that somehow made my parents adore her more. Where I was disciplined, Sabrina was spontaneous. Where I was cautious, she was free-spirited, which is a flattering family term for irresponsible when the person doing it is charming enough. She dropped out of community college after a year, bounced through retail, reception work, and a brief attempt at becoming a fitness influencer, and somehow still managed to be treated like the misunderstood baby of the family instead of a grown woman making bad decisions in cute shoes. My father, Richard, is 62, retired from Boeing after 35 years as a machinist. My mother, Linda, is 59 and still works part-time at a salon doing manicures for women. She's known long enough to gossip with by first name. They live in the same modest 3-bedroom ranch in Puyallup where I grew up. And for 8 years, I paid the mortgage on it. Before anyone decides to turn me into some selfless saint, let me explain. When I was 26 and finally making real money, my father had a triple bypass after a terrifying health scare. Insurance covered most of the surgery, but most is a cruel word when what's left is still enough to wipe out everything. Their savings vanished. The house was suddenly hanging by a thread. My mother cried every night on the phone. My father never asked me directly because pride was the only luxury he still thought he could afford, but I heard the desperation anyway. So I stepped in, $1,847 a month. Every month, for 8 straight years. Over $177,000, not counting the property taxes I covered twice, the roof repair, the truck I helped my father replace, the dental work I paid for when my mother's insurance refused to. I never announced it at holidays, never held it over their heads, never made speeches about sacrifice. I just did it because they were my parents, and because I loved them, and because I thought love looked like helping before someone had to beg. What I didn't understand then was that once people get used to your help, they stop seeing it as help. It becomes the weather, expected, unremarkable, something they only notice when it disappears. Sabrina knew I was paying the mortgage, of course. My father had told her years earlier, probably hoping it would inspire shame. It did not. Her response, according to him, had been, "Danielle makes corporate money. She's fine." That was Sabrina in one sentence. Other people's effort always looked effortless to her. Then there was Adrian Morales, 31. Smart, polished, handsome, in that careful way that made women glance twice, and men instinctively square their shoulders a little. He worked as an executive assistant at a respected law firm in downtown Seattle and made decent money, enough to be comfortable, not enough to impress me more than his consistency did. We met 4 years ago at a friend's wedding in Bellevue. I was a bridesmaid. He was standing near the bar pretending not to look bored during the rehearsal dinner. We started talking, and by the end of the night, it felt strangely easy, like stepping into warm light after a cold day. He was funny without performing, attentive without being clingy. He had this calm confidence that made you feel safe instead of managed. Dark hair, beautiful smile, the kind of voice that could make a simple, "How was your day?" sound like he actually wanted the answer. I fell for him fast. Not recklessly, not stupidly, just thoroughly. We dated for 2 years before he asked me to marry him. He took me to the San Juan Islands, rented a private cabin overlooking the water, cooked dinner himself, salmon, roasted vegetables, a wine sauce he nearly ruined but saved at the last second while laughing at himself, and proposed on the beach at sunset with my grandmother's ring. I cried. Of course I cried. I said yes before he finished the question. For a while, everything felt exactly the way a future is supposed to feel when it's still clean and unwounded. We talked about buying a house together. We talked about children in the abstract, the way happy couples do when they believe time is something that belongs to them. We looked at neighborhoods on the east side, compared school districts we didn't need yet, browsed furniture we weren't ready to buy. I was all in. That was the part that made what happened later feel less like heartbreak and more like demolition. At first, I loved how well Adrian fit into my family. My mother adored him immediately, said he was thoughtful, traditional, solid. My father approved because Adrian talked to him like his opinions mattered and offered to help with little things around the house without being asked. Sabrina liked him too, which should have been my first moment of unease because she rarely liked anyone who had my full attention. But I told myself it was a good sign. He came to family dinners. He helped my mother carry groceries. He stood in the yard with my father talking about tools and weather and the Mariners like he'd been born into us. And Sabrina started orbiting him in a way I noticed without letting myself name. At dinner, she always ended up beside him. She laughed too hard at things that weren't funny. He'd show her something on his phone and they'd tilt toward each other, shoulders nearly touching, smiling at some private little moment I wasn't part of. She started bringing up conversations she and Adrian had apparently had when I wasn't around. "Oh, Adrian already told me about that. Adrian said your company's doing layoffs? Adrian thinks you should take more time off." Small comments, easy to dismiss, impossible to forget. There were other things. She complimented his clothes more than any sister should compliment her future brother-in-law. He noticed when she changed her hair. They started following each other into the backyard during family gatherings, always for something harmless. Fresh air, a phone call, checking on the grill. Sometimes they'd be gone 15 or 20 minutes. When I mentioned it once, lightly, jokingly, Adrian kissed my forehead and told me I was being cute. Cute. That word should be outlawed when a man uses it to make a woman doubt her own instincts. I wanted to believe him, so I did. That's the humiliating part about betrayal before the proof arrives. It doesn't begin with discovery. It begins with self-abandonment. With all the little moments where your body knows something is wrong and your mind rushes in to defend the people hurting you. About a year into our engagement, Adrian began to pull away from me in ways that were almost too precise to challenge. Physically first, then emotionally. Our intimacy went from warm and regular to infrequent to strained. He stayed later at work, started keeping his phone face down, changed the passcode without mentioning it, took calls in other rooms, said he was tired, said the firm was understaffed, said wedding planning was stressing him out, said all the right things in the right tone until I felt guilty for even noticing. I told myself this was adulthood, pressure, timing, burnout. I told myself love could survive a season of distance. Then came the trip. His firm was supposedly sending him to Phoenix for a 4-day legal conference in early March. I offered to go with him and turn it into a long weekend after the sessions were over. He smiled, stroked my hand, and said it would be nothing but boring panels and networking dinners. "You'd hate it," he said. "Let me get through this one, and I'll make it up to you." So he left on a Thursday morning with a suitcase, a kiss, and a promise to text me updates. Friday night, around 8, I got a message from my friend Kate, who still lived near Puyallup. "Danielle, random question. Isn't Adrian supposed to be in Phoenix? Because I swear I just saw his car outside your parents' house." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "How's Phoenix?" No answer. At 11:07 p.m., he finally replied, "Conference is exhausting. Sorry, baby. Just got back to the hotel. Miss you." He attached a selfie in a generic room with beige walls and bad lighting. It should have reassured me. Instead, it made something cold slide down the center of my chest. Because for the first time, I didn't read his message like a woman in love. I read it like a woman being lied to. And once that thought enters your body, sleep becomes impossible. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed with my phone on my chest, the screen going dark and lighting up again. Every time I reopened Adrian's message, as if repetition might make it feel more believable. The hotel selfie sat there like a challenge. Beige wall, generic lamp, white bedding, nothing in the frame that proved where he was, only what he wanted me to assume. That was the thing about lies told by practiced people. They rarely over-explained. They gave you just enough to help you betray yourself. Around 2 a.m, I got up and walked barefoot into the kitchen. Seattle was silent outside my condo windows, the kind of heavy silence that makes every small sound feel accusatory. I poured water, didn't drink it, opened the fridge, closed it, stood there with my arms folded over my stomach like I was trying to hold something inside me that was already breaking loose. Maybe Kate had been wrong. Maybe it had been a similar car. Maybe Adrian had stopped by my parents' house before leaving town and Kate had seen it earlier. Maybe. The human mind becomes embarrassingly creative when the truth threatens to gut it. By 5:30, I had stopped pretending I was going to stay home. I threw on jeans, a black sweater, pulled my hair into a low knot, grabbed my keys, and drove south while the sky was still that bruised pre-dawn color that makes everything look unfinished. The roads were mostly empty. My hands stayed locked at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every red light felt personal. Every mile felt like I was driving toward the version of my life where nothing would ever be simple again. I kept hoping I would get there and feel foolish. I wanted embarrassment. I would have taken embarrassment gladly. It was just after 8 in the morning when I turned onto my parents' street, and there it was, Adrian's car, parked in the driveway, right beside Sabrina's. I don't think my body understood it immediately. My mind did. My body lagged behind, still trying to function inside ordinary motions. I parked at the curb, turned off the engine, sat there staring through the windshield while my pulse pounded so hard it made the edges of my vision flutter. There are moments in life when denial dies quietly. Not dramatically, not with a scream. It just stops breathing. I got out of the car and walked to the front door with the same numb focus I'd used to carry a full glass without spilling it. I still had my childhood key on my ring. Of course I did. I had never needed to prove I belonged there. The lock clicked. The house was quiet. Morning light stretched across the hardwood in pale rectangles. The air smelled like coffee that had already been made and left sitting too long. Somewhere upstairs, floorboards creaked softly. I closed the door behind me without letting it slam. Then I heard it. A muffled laugh. A man's voice, low and familiar. Sabrina's voice answering. My entire body went cold. Not hot, not shaking, cold. I took the stairs one at a time, slowly enough that every step felt deliberate. Halfway up, I realized my heart had gone strangely calm. It wasn't that I wasn't emotional. It was that something in me had moved past emotion into impact, like the moment after a car crash when you're injured, but don't feel the pain yet because your brain has decided survival comes first. The sound was coming from Sabrina's old bedroom, the bedroom with the pale blue walls. My mother had once let her repaint herself. The bedroom where she used to tape magazine clippings to the closet door and cry over stupid high school boyfriends, while I sat on the floor helping her rehearse speeches about self-respect she never remembered once the boy apologized. That room, that door. I stood outside it for 1 second. Then I opened it. They were in bed together. Adrian, my boyfriend, my future, or what I had been stupid enough to call my future, and my younger sister. For one suspended second, nobody moved. The morning light hit everything too clearly. The twisted blanket, Sabrina's hair across the pillow, Adrian's bare shoulder, the expression on his face when shock turned instantly into fear. Sabrina grabbed the sheet and yanked it to her chest. Adrian sat up too fast, like speed could somehow correct reality. Danielle, that was all he got out. My name, as if he still had any right to say it. Sabrina looked less ashamed than terrified, which somehow felt worse. Shame would have implied a conscience. Terror only meant consequences had arrived sooner than expected. I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, and took them in fully. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask questions no answer could ever make better. How long? How many times? Here? In this house? While I was paying for this house? But something colder and cleaner moved through me instead, because the truth was already visible. I did not need details to understand the shape of what they had done. I looked at Adrian, then at Sabrina, and I said nothing. That silence scared them more than rage would have. I turned around, walked down the stairs, crossed the living room, opened in the front door, and left. Behind me I heard movement upstairs, a voice calling my name, then 2 voices, then feet. But by then I was already outside, already in the car, already closing the door on the sound of my own life splitting in half. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so hard my hands shook. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Adrian calling. Then again. Then Sabrina. Then my mother. Then my father. Messages piled in on the screen so fast I stopped reading after the first few. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. Danielle, wait. Come back inside so we can talk. Talk. They always want to talk after the truth no longer requires words. I put the phone on silent and drove back to Seattle in a daze so complete I only remember fragments of it. A gas station sign, gray sky, the sound of my turn signal clicking long after I needed it. When I got home, I went straight into motion. That was the strangest part. I did not collapse. I became efficient. I opened my closet and stared at the section Adrian had slowly expanded into over the last year. Shirts, shoes, a jacket he insisted he needed to leave at my place because traffic made spontaneity difficult, toiletries in my bathroom, a mug he liked, a spare phone charger near the couch. Little domestic claims I had once found comforting and now saw for what they were, evidence of occupation. I pulled out 2 black garbage bags and started packing. Every shirt folded once and dropped in. Every pair of shoes. Every book. Every razor. Every trace. The engagement photos in the hallway came down next. I didn't smash the frames. I opened the backs carefully and removed the prints like I was handling documents in a case file. By the time I was done, the condo looked larger, emptier, truer. My phone kept vibrating on the counter. I ignored it. At noon, I called Adrian's father. He answered on the 3rd ring, cheerful at first, until he heard my voice. Mr. Morales, I said, calm enough that I barely recognized myself. Your son's things are on my front porch. Please come pick them up within 2 hours. If they're still there after that, I'll donate them. A pause. Then, cautious. Danielle, what happened? I looked at the tied garbage bags by the door. I caught him in bed with my younger sister. Silence. A sharp inhale. Then, my God. I did not fill the silence for him. Finally, he said quieter, I'll be there. I hung up. Then I blocked Adrian everywhere. Phone, text, email, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, because betrayal makes you oddly thorough. Sabrina's number went next, then my mother's, then my father's. After that, I opened the small velvet ring box in my dresser and looked at the engagement ring, my grandmother's ring. 3 generations. Cleaned, resized, chosen with care and love, and all the optimism that now felt humiliating to remember. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I placed it back in the box, wrapped the box in tissue paper, and wrote a note to myself with the date and time I had recovered it. It was absurdly clinical, but something in me already understood that when people betray you this deeply, memory becomes evidence. You document, you preserve, you do not rely on sentiment to protect you. At 1:45, Adrian's father arrived with a truck. I watched him from the window for a moment before opening the door. He looked older than he had the last time I'd seen him. Or maybe disgrace ages everyone it touches. He didn't argue, didn't defend his son, didn't offer excuses. His eyes went to the bags on the porch, then back to me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I believed that he was, and it still meant nothing. I pointed to the bags. He loaded them into the truck himself. When he finished, he turned like he wanted to say something else, maybe on his son's behalf. Maybe as a father to a woman whose trust had just been ruined by another man's weakness. He thought better of it. He left. I poured bourbon into a glass at 2 p.m. and sat on the floor in my living room because the couch suddenly felt like a place where another version of me had once lived. I didn't cry. I kept waiting to cry, but numbness is its own kind of violence. It robs you even of the relief of breaking. By evening, the calls had become relentless. My parents found new numbers. Sabrina left voicemails. Adrian emailed from an address I didn't know. I did not listen to most of them, but I read just enough to understand the pattern. It hadn't meant to happen. They hadn't planned it. They were confused. They never wanted to hurt me. The language of cowards is always so passive, as if betrayal is weather, as if they were caught in something unfortunate instead of walking into it again and again. At 6 p.m., I sent one message in a group text to my parents and Sabrina before blocking that thread too. I saw what I saw. Adrian is out of my life. All of you are out of my life. Do not contact me again. Then I turned off my phone completely. Monday morning, I went to work. That sounds insane, maybe, but routine can become a life raft when your private world is on fire. I put on a navy blouse, tailored trousers, small gold earrings, and the face of a woman whose life had not just been detonated inside her childhood home. At the office, I told two close friends only this: the relationship was over. They looked at my face, saw enough there not to pry, and nodded. The hardest part was not losing Adrian. That truth settled faster than I expected. The second I saw him in that bed, whatever future I had imagined with him died so completely that morning it felt almost irrelevant. He disgusted me, not because he had chosen someone else, because he had chosen deceit, cowardice, proximity, convenience. He had looked me in the eye, accepted my trust, slept in my bed, taken my love, and then driven to my parents' house to betray me under the roof I was paying for. No, the hardest part was my family. Because over the next few weeks, through small-town whispers, mutual friends, and a few furious messages that slipped through before I closed every possible door, I learned the part that made everything uglier. It had not been one reckless mistake. It had been going on for 6 months. 6 months. They had been meeting whenever I wasn't around. At my parents' house, at Sabrina's apartment, in hotel rooms they booked in the middle of the day under stupid, obvious lies. And my parents knew. My mother had caught them once in the laundry room. My father had found them together another time when he came home earlier than expected. Neither of them told me. Not one word. They let me keep paying the mortgage. Let me keep visiting. Let me keep planning a wedding with a man who was already sleeping with my sister. Let me keep moving toward a future they knew was rotten at the foundation. I tried once to imagine what kind of mother watches that happen and says nothing. I couldn't. 3 weeks after I found them, my mother finally reached me from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I thought it was a work call. The second I heard her voice, mine went cold. "Danielle, sweetheart, please just listen." "No, please. Adrian and Sabrina. They love each other. It happened, and no one meant for it to go this far." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. There it was. Not remorse. Not horror. Justification. "They had 6 months to tell me," I said. Silence. Then, softly, as if soothing a child, "You can't always control where feelings go." I laughed once, a short sound with no humor in it. "Actually, Mom, adults control themselves all the time. Don't be cruel." Cruel. That word. How quickly families use it when you refuse to absorb their sin quietly. "You let me keep paying your mortgage while you protected Sabrina's affair with my boyfriend," I said. "Do not ever call me cruel." Then I ended the call and blocked that number too. After that, the messages multiplied like flies around a wound. My father left a voicemail saying I was throwing away family over a man. Sabrina sent a long email about how complicated love is and how she never meant to hurt me, which was interesting, considering she seemed willing to keep hurting me indefinitely as long as no one caught her. And Adrian sent the most infuriating message of all. He said he still cared about me deeply, deeply, as if depth made betrayal noble. As if I was supposed to be touched, that he had ruined my life with emotional nuance. I never replied. Not to him, not to any of them. But silence, I was beginning to understand, was not the same thing as surrender. And somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the nausea, beneath the humiliation, something else was starting to form. Something harder, more precise. Because the more I learned, the more one truth kept rising above all the others. They had not only betrayed my heart, they had betrayed my loyalty while depending on it. And that kind of betrayal has a cost, whether people are wise enough to calculate it or not. For 3 more months, I kept paying the mortgage. Every single payment. On time, automatic, silent. If you're expecting me to say it was because I still loved them, or because I needed time to process, or because I was hoping for some kind of reconciliation, no, I did it because I was thinking. Because while they were busy rewriting reality into something that made them feel justified, I was doing what I've always done best. I was observing patterns, running numbers, waiting. There's a difference between reacting to betrayal and understanding it. Reaction is emotional. Understanding is strategic. And strategy requires patience. So I kept everything exactly the same. No messages, no contact, no explanations. Just the quiet continuation of a financial lifeline they had come to treat like oxygen. And just like oxygen, they only noticed its importance when it was threatened. The threat arrived in June, in the form of a wedding invitation. It showed up at my office in a thick, cream-colored envelope with raised lettering that screamed money they didn't have. I recognized the handwriting on the outer label immediately. Sabrina's. Of course. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it, already knowing it would be worse than anything inside me was prepared to handle. I was right. Sabrina Thompson and Adrian Morales request the honor of your presence at their wedding. 6 months. 6 months after I caught them in bed together. They were getting married. I didn't feel heartbreak reading that. I felt something colder, something sharper, because heartbreak belongs to love. This was something else. This was insult. I flipped the card over. The venue was a winery in Woodinville, a very specific winery. The same one Adrian and I had toured together when we were planning our wedding. The same one we had both agreed was too expensive. Apparently, it wasn't too expensive anymore. Not when you weren't paying for it yourself. I almost put the invitation back in the envelope right then. Almost. But then my eyes caught the line printed near the bottom, and everything inside me went perfectly still. Sabrina will be escorted down the aisle by her father, Richard Thompson. I read it again, then again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't misreading the level of deliberate cruelty. My father, walking my sister down the aisle, to marry the man who had cheated on me with her. The man I was supposed to marry. The man I had built a future around. The symbolism wasn't accidental. It wasn't subtle. It was a public declaration, a rewriting of roles, a quiet announcement to the world that I had been replaced so completely that even my position in my own story had been reassigned. That was the moment something in me finally snapped into place. Not emotionally. Logically. I went home that evening and opened my laptop. Pulled up my banking history. 8 years of payments, month after month. No gaps, no delays. Then I opened a spreadsheet, because that's what I do when something matters. I quantify it. I listed every mortgage payment. $1,847 times 96 months. $177,312. Then I added everything else. Property taxes I had covered. $8,500. Roof replacement. $12,000. My father's truck. $15,000. My mother's dental work. $6,800. Groceries. Gifts. Emergencies. I estimated conservatively. By the time I was done, the number sat on my screen, clean and undeniable. $224,612. That's what I had given them, not loaned. Given, freely, without contracts, without conditions, without ever asking for anything in return except something so basic it never occurred to me to define it out loud. Loyalty, honesty, the bare minimum expectation that if my life was being dismantled from the inside, the people benefiting from my sacrifice might have the decency to tell me. They didn't. Instead, they protected the people betraying me, while I kept funding their lives. That was the part that mattered. Not the cheating. Not even the wedding. The fact that they had continued to rely on me while actively choosing against me. That was the real equation. And suddenly, for the first time since everything happened, it balanced. Because I realized something simple. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not emotionally. Not financially. Not morally. If anything, they had been living on borrowed time. And borrowed money. Mine. I closed the spreadsheet. Opened my banking app. And changed one thing. Just one. The automatic mortgage payment that had been running for 8 years. I didn't cancel it. That would have been obvious. Immediate. Messy. Instead, I redirected it. Same amount. Same date. Same schedule. Different destination. A separate savings account under my name. The payment would still leave my account on time. It just wouldn't go to their mortgage company anymore. They wouldn't know immediately. The first missed payment notice would come from the bank. They would assume it was an error. A glitch. A temporary issue. Because that's what people assume when they've never had to question their safety net. I set the change to take effect September 1st. The wedding was October 12th. That gave them just enough time to notice, to panic, to realize, but not enough time to fix anything. It was precise, deliberate, controlled. Then I closed the app and waited. Wow. September 15th. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Listened later, my father's voice. Danielle, sweetheart, the mortgage company says we missed a payment. There must be some mistake. Maybe the bank had an issue. Can you check on your end? His tone was calm. Assuming. Certain this was temporary. Certain I would fix it. I deleted the voicemail. September 20th. A text from another number. My mother. Danielle, please call us. This isn't funny anymore. We got another notice. Something is wrong with the mortgage. I stared at the message, then typed one word. No. Blocked the number. September 30th. Sabrina, of course. Are you seriously going to let mom and dad lose their house over this? Be an adult. Family is family. I read it twice, then replied, be an adult and pay your own family's bills. Or ask your fiancé to help. A pause, then typing bubbles. Then nothing. I blocked her. And for the first time since everything began, I felt something close to calm. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Just alignment. Because for months they had been living inside a version of reality where their choices had no consequences. And now, that version was starting to collapse. Exactly on schedule. October arrived quietly. No announcement, no warning. Just a shift in the air. By then, the panic had already started spreading through my family like something contagious. I didn't need to speak to them to know. Desperation has a rhythm, and I had learned to recognize it. Missed calls from unfamiliar numbers. Voicemails that started calm and ended strained. Messages that shifted from confusion to urgency to something closer to fear. They still believed, at first, that this was temporary. A mistake. Something I would fix. Because that's what I had always done. Fix things. Absorb pressure. Smoothed over problems that weren't mine. They hadn't realized yet that I had stopped being that person the moment I opened that bedroom door. October 3rd. 9 days before the wedding. My phone rang again from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something in me, curiosity maybe, made me answer. Hello? Silence for half a second. Then, Danielle, it's Adrian. His voice. Soft. Careful. As if tone could undo what actions had already sealed. I almost hung up immediately. I should have, but I didn't. What do you want? I asked. A breath on the other end. I know you're still upset. I laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it cut through whatever script he had prepared. Upset? I repeated. That's the word you're choosing? I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. Look, I know what we did hurt you, but... But? I prompted. There it was. The pivot. The justification. The wedding is in a few days, he continued, voice tightening. And we thought maybe you could come. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was considering it, but because I wanted to hear how far he would go. You're Sabrina's sister, he added. You're part of the family. It wouldn't feel right without you there. Family. That word again. Always used like a shield. Never like a responsibility. I see, I said quietly. We want to move forward, he continued. All of us. Together. No more anger, no more resentment. Just healing. Healing. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. Let me ask you something, I said. When you were in bed with my sister, in my parents' house, while I was paying their mortgage, was that part of the healing process too? Silence. Real silence this time. Not strategic. Not controlled. Just empty. That's not fair, he said finally weakly. Fair? I repeated. You want to talk about fair? Danielle, we didn't plan this. It just happened. We fell in love. There it was. The line they always hide behind. As if love excuses the method. As if feelings erase responsibility. I don't care what you call it, I said. What you did wasn't love. It was convenience. It was cowardice. It was choosing the easiest betrayal available. That's not true. It is, I said calmly, and you know it. Another pause. Then, softer. You're being cruel. I let that sit between us for a moment. Then I said evenly, no, I'm being accurate. His breathing shifted. I could hear the frustration now. The loss of control. Look, he said, voice tightening. We're trying to do the right thing now. We're getting married. We're building something real. You can't keep punishing everyone forever. I almost smiled. Punishing. That was what he thought this was. You think this is punishment? I asked. What else would you call it? I leaned back against the counter. Consequences, I said. And for the first time in the conversation, he didn't have an answer. The wedding happened on October 12th. I didn't go. Not because I couldn't. Because I wouldn't. But that didn't mean I didn't see it. Kate went. She sent photos. Quietly. Without commentary. Just evidence. The venue was exactly as beautiful as I remembered. Golden autumn light. Rows of chairs facing the vineyard. White flowers arranged with expensive simplicity. Everything curated. Everything perfect. From the outside. In one photo, my mother stood near the front, dabbing at her eyes. Smiling. Like nothing had been taken. Like nothing had been replaced. Like I had never existed in that space. In another, my father, standing at the end of the aisle. Sabrina on his arm, walking her forward. Steady, composed, fulfilling the role he had chosen. Not as my father, but as hers. And behind her, Adrian, waiting, smiling, like he had won something. Like he hadn't stolen it. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because it clarified everything. That was the moment I understood something with complete certainty. I wasn't part of that family anymore. Not emotionally, not structurally, not even symbolically. They had rewritten the story, removed me from it, and expected me to keep funding the set. October 18th, 6 days after the wedding. Another call. This time I answered immediately. My father. Danielle, he said, voice strained in a way I had never heard before. We need to talk. No, I said. Please, he pushed. This isn't about everything else. This is about the house. Of course it was. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings, he continued. We're 3 payments behind. They want everything caught up, late fees included. It's over $6,000. We don't have that kind of money. I said nothing. Your mother is beside herself, he added. We're trying to figure something out, but Danielle, we need your help. There it was. Not apology. Not accountability. Need. I'm not helping, I said. A long pause. Then, disbelief. You're serious? Yes. Danielle, we're your parents. And I was your daughter, I replied. Silence. Heavy. Pressing. You're really going to let us lose the house? He asked. I thought about that. Not emotionally. Factually. You lost the house, I said. You just haven't finished losing it yet. That's not fair. There's that word again, I said quietly. His voice hardened slightly. You're being vindictive. No, I said. I'm being consistent. Consistent with what? With reality, I replied. Another silence. Then, we raised you, he said. We gave you everything. I almost laughed. Everything. Did you? I asked. He didn't answer. Because from where I'm standing, I continued, I gave you a house for 8 years, and you used it to host my sister's affair with my boyfriend. That's not... It is, I said, and we're done talking about it. Danielle, I hung up, and for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I felt final. November came quickly. So did the foreclosure notice. Not sent to me, but forwarded. A handwritten letter from my mother arrived a few days later. Floral stationery. Careful script. Emotional language. 30 years in that house. Memories. Family. Begging. Always begging at the end. I read it once, then placed it in a folder. Didn't respond. December. They lost the house. Just like that. 30 years reduced to paperwork and deadlines and signatures. Everything they thought was permanent. Gone. Because permanence requires stability. And stability requires truth. They had neither. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding everything together. They moved in with Sabrina and Adrian 2 days after the foreclosure finalized. I didn't hear it from them. Of course not. I heard it from Kate. Small towns don't keep secrets. They just delay them. 1-bedroom apartment, she told me over coffee, her voice low, careful. They gave your parents the bedroom. Sabrina and Adrian are on the couch. I pictured it instantly. 4 adults. 1 small space. No privacy. No distance. No illusion left to hide inside. That's not going to last, I said. Kate didn't argue. She didn't need to. Some outcomes don't require prediction. They announce themselves the moment the conditions are set. The first cracks showed up within weeks. Arguments. Constant. Petty at first, then louder, sharper, harder to contain. According to people who still drifted through that social circle, Sabrina started snapping about space, about noise, about routines being disrupted, about not signing up for this. Adrian, who had once been so composed, so measured, started picking up extra shifts, staying out longer, coming home later. Avoidance. The oldest survival tactic in a collapsing environment. My mother cried. Frequently, my father stopped speaking unless spoken to. Depression settled into him like something permanent. And Sabrina, the golden child, was finally living inside consequences she couldn't charm her way out of. By the end of December, the marriage had already started to fracture. Not dramatically, not in one explosive moment, but in a slow, grinding way that wears people down until even silence feels like conflict. New Year's Eve passed without celebration. No photos, no posts, no curated happiness, just absence. And sometimes absence says more than anything else. On December 30th, I got a message. Facebook, from Sabrina. I hadn't blocked her there, not intentionally. I just hadn't thought about it. Danielle, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to say something. Mom and Dad lost the house last week. They're living with us now. It's not good. Adrian and I are fighting constantly. This isn't what I thought it would be. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. They lost everything because of you. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to be very clear on what she believed. They lost everything because of you. I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly. Then I typed. Not quickly, not emotionally, carefully, because clarity matters more than speed when you're closing something permanently. Let me explain something to you, Sabrina. I paused, then continued. For 8 years, I paid the mortgage on that house. Every month. No missed payments, no conditions, no complaints. I gave Mom and Dad stability they could not afford on their own. Typing bubbles appeared. I ignored them. During that time, you and Adrian were sleeping together behind my back, in that house, while I was paying for it. The bubbles disappeared. Mom and Dad knew. They chose not to tell me. They chose to protect you instead. They chose to let me keep funding their lives while you destroyed mine. I could feel my pulse steady. Not rising. Steady. So let's be very clear about what happened. I leaned forward slightly. They didn't lose everything because of me. Another pause. Then I finished. They lost everything because they chose you. No response came. Not immediately. Not later that day. Not the next. And that silence? That was the first honest thing she had given me in months. January brought confirmation. From multiple directions. The marriage wasn't just strained. It was failing. Sabrina had started complaining openly to friends. About money. About space. About how Adrian wasn't who she thought he was. Which was interesting. Because he was exactly who he had shown himself to be. She just hadn't been on the receiving end of it before. Adrian, meanwhile, looked different. Tired. Heavier. Like something had settled on him that he couldn't shake. Responsibility, maybe. Or regret. Or the slow realization that desire and reality are not the same thing, and building a life requires more than just wanting something you're not supposed to have. February. The house officially sold. Below market value. Of course. Foreclosure always comes with a discount. 30 years of memories reduced to a transaction. A line item. Gone. March brought the inevitable. Sabrina filed for divorce. 4 months. That's how long it lasted. 4 months between this is real love and legal separation. Kate told me everything. Not dramatically, just facts. Sabrina had reached a breaking point. The pressure, the financial strain, the constant proximity to my parents, the reality of Adrian's limitations. All of it stacked until there was nothing left to pretend. And Adrian didn't fight it, because somewhere along the way, he had already lost whatever illusion he had been chasing. A few days later, I got another message. From Adrian. Voicemail. New number. His voice was different. Not composed. Not controlled. Fractured. Danielle, I know you probably won't respond, but you were right about everything. I messed up. I messed up so badly. She left. Mom and Dad are still here. I can't afford this place on my own. Everything's falling apart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of irrelevance. Because apologies don't change outcomes. They just acknowledge them. April. One more message. This time from Sabrina. Email. Long. Carefully written. She admitted everything. The selfishness. The excitement. The illusion. She said she couldn't respect Adrian after how they started. Said she couldn't respect herself. Said she thought about me. About what our lives could have been if she hadn't made that choice. She called me a good sister. Said I deserved better. I read it. Saved it. Didn't reply. Because there was nothing left to say. Now, 6 months later, here's where everyone stands. My parents are still living in that same apartment, waiting for affordable housing. 18 to 24 months. Minimum. My father's health has declined. Stress does that. My mother barely speaks to Sabrina. Resentment does that. Sabrina works longer hours now. Quieter. Less certain. Adrian moved out. Last I heard, he's renting a small place alone. Trying to rebuild something he doesn't fully understand how to rebuild. And me? I wake up in my own home. Quiet. Stable. Uncompromised. There's no chaos. No manipulation. No expectation that I will sacrifice myself to keep other people comfortable. Just space and clarity and something I didn't realize I had lost until it came back. Peace. Do I feel satisfied? No, not in the way people expect. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. A rebalancing of something that had been tilted for too long. They made choices. So did I. The difference is, I understood what mine would cost. They didn't. And that's why they're still paying for them. As for me, I don't hate them. I don't miss them. I just see them clearly now. Not as my family, but as people I used to know. And sometimes, that's the cleanest ending you're ever going to get.